Hey everybody, a few months ago somebody emailed me and basically asked what were my credentials when I was looking for my first custom corset, when I was transitioning from the off-the-rack industry to choosing a corset maker for myself. And if I had to summarize my whole custom corset commission ordering experience over the years, I think I've had three distinct phases. So I'm going to discuss those three phases here and basically what I learned within those phases. So phase one occurred between 2010 and 2011. And basically my biggest credential was price. So I was looking for the most economic or the most affordable, the most inexpensive made-to-measure corsets ever. And I was willing to forego mock-up fitting or consultation or anything else and just go for a corset that was made to my measurements and trust that they knew what they were doing. So for my first few made-to-measure corsets, I was going with corset makers that were basically offering made-to-measure for under $200 US. And although there are these unicorns in the corset industry where they do offer custom corsets for under $200 and they are beautiful quality, they're very comfortable, they're very well made, those are very few and far between. And what I can say is the overwhelming majority of the time, you do get what you pay for. So what I found was these corset makers were not always the most experienced. Many were just trying to get their foot in the market, and so they felt that they had to undercut other more experienced corset makers in order to actually start getting commissions from people. But there were some fitting issues, there were some comfort issues, there were communication issues. And if there weren't any of these things, if the corset maker was very talented and skilled and made comfortable corsets, then there were often long wait times instead. Not only because that corset maker was very popular, but also because perhaps shipping was not the most reliable from the country that they were working from, and it took a long time to get here, and then I had to pay through the nose for shipping and duty costs or whatnot. So it's kind of like that meme that you might see for independent artists. You can get something quickly, you can get something inexpensively, or you can get something high quality. And those three existing all within the same time pretty much doesn't exist. A lot of the time you can get two of the three, but not all three together. So my very first made-to-measure corset that I did not make myself was a front lacing cincher, and I made an entire video all about my regrets around that. So I'll link that up in the cards and down in the description below if you want to learn more. And then my second custom piece was by Heavenly Corsets. Actually, my second and third pieces were both by Heavenly Corsets, which at first I defended, but then over time, I had to make several alterations to make the fit a little bit better, and then I ended up selling it off to one of my corset body twins and friends within the corset community. So what I learned from this particular phase is that you get what you pay for the overwhelming majority of the time, and although you can get lucky, going for the cheapest custom possible is a very risky game. The second phase of my custom corset buying experience happened between 2012 and 2013, and basically I focused on proximity. So I did not really care so much how much the corset cost. That was a little bit of a factor. I gave myself a budget of $300 to $400 at the time, but I started recognizing the value of having a mock-up fitting, or at least trying on some of their sample corsets to see how they fit and how comfortable they are before you actually invest in the final corset. It was also good to get to know the maker, to build a rapport so that they understand what sort of things you are looking for in a corset, and if you have any sort of idiosyncrasies with your body, any asymmetries or sensitive areas that they can pattern around, you can talk about that. Making sure that your personal aesthetic and their aesthetic for what they create are complementary or compatible. And apart from all this, it is also really good to support local artists in your area. So for those reasons, I started seeking out corset makers within the Toronto area. And so the first one that I went to was, they're now called Bone and Bust Couture, but at the time they were called Totally Wasted. And I got a mock-up fitting in a custom corset from her. And I also got a sample from Starker's Corsetry when they were doing a sample sale. Unfortunately, that was not the perfect fit for my body, but we have actually started discussing more recently the possibility of doing a custom commission in the future. So I'm really excited about that opportunity. And the third was L'Atelier de la Fleur. And I did not have a mock-up fitting per se, but I got to try on a lot of her corset samples because we do wear a similar size, or at least we did at the time. And so she knew the measurements of those samples and she saw how it fit on my body and she was just like, yes. So the back could be a little bit higher, it could be let out a bit at the ribs, it could be taken a bit at the hips, it could nip in like 1 inch more at the waistline. So even though it was not a mock-up fitting per se that she could actually slash and spread or pin in certain areas, it was still very valuable experience. But coming back to my point, having an in-person meeting with the corset maker to make sure that you two are compatible and having them take your measurements in person and fit you in person is one of the most valuable parts of the whole custom process. If you are paying extra for, say, a mock-up fitting or a consultation and meeting with the corset maker, you're not just purchasing a thing and a product that you take home, you are also purchasing their time and their experience and the whole getting to know you process to make sure that they are making a garment that perfectly suits your taste and your comfort. And they are lending you their experience and expertise, so it's also an educational process for you. So not all corset makers may offer a mock-up fitting, and not all corset makers may have standard size corsets in stock to, for you to try on. But normally a person who is experienced with custom commissions will offer one or the other, or possibly even both if you want to have multiple fittings. So it is a very, very valuable thing for a corset maker to see how your body responds to the compression of a corset, see how your flesh redistributes in response to reduction of the waistline. Make sure it's comfortable for you, that it's flattering at a 360-degree angle. And this is the beauty of being fitted in person, because the corset maker can point out little fitting issues that you might not have noticed yourself if you were, say, fitting a mock-up on yourself through Skype or just taking photos and sending it to them online. Or maybe you might have noticed that something was slightly off, but you might not know how to quite verbalize it or really suggest what to change, and they might know exactly what to do because they are able to sort of manipulate the fit on you while you're standing right in front of them. And so that is all part of the whole commission process as well. You're also paying for that type of experience. In my case, buying a made-to-measure corset from a local corsetiere in Toronto meant that I was paying easily twice what I paid for my very first made-to-measure corset. But I am very fortunate that all of the makers around here have over like 20 years of experience each. And so they were able to recognize the fitting issues. They were able to lend their expertise. I was able to try on corsets in front of them, and they were able to suggest changes that I didn't know that were even possibilities and options at the time. And so that was an invaluable experience. And on top of that, I do feel good about supporting local artists. All this being said, I have noticed that there are some similarities in, for instance, the patterning or the heaviness or the structure of corsets made by Torontonian corset makers, as there are similarities between many UK made corsets, and there are similarities between many Polish corset makers. So the corset industry does tend to be quite insular, and some corset makers within a small geographical area may be friends and may share lots of their corset making experience. And although each of them have their unique charm and each of them are perfectly sufficient, for instance, for waist training or whatnot, in the context of this channel and trying many different types of corsets, I did branch out to overseas corsetieres, and I wanted to try different corsets that looked to be unique or different in some way, whether it's in terms of the silhouette, the constructions, the material used, the lightness or flexibility of it versus the rigidity of other corsets. And so it was in this 2013 and 2014 time that I was still kind of looking for my perfect little black corset, but I did start experimenting and ordering corsets with like little embellishments here and there. And what I realized was that there are so many ways to make a corset, and not one of them is totally perfect for everybody. There are so many different construction methods, so many ways that you can pattern a corset, so many different silhouettes that you can make for the same basic set of body measurements. And it was a very expensive time of trial and error to find something that I really liked. And the problem was that I liked them all, but I wish that I could combine different elements of each of them. But asking a corset maker to do something different from their aesthetic is kind of like, going to one artist and asking them to draw in the style of another one. And so my third phase of ordering a custom corset was basically prestige or ingenuity. And so this was around the 2013, 2014 area and coming up to basically today. So when I was ready to commission my first couture made to measure custom overbust corset, I knew right away that I had to own something from Sparkle Run. And at the time she was just huge, blowing up. Everything she did, people just gobbled it up. She was one of the most esteemed corset makers in the world probably at that time. And some people still believe that she was one of the greatest corset makers of our generation. And I knew that she had phases where she was very prolific, and then she tended to take a break and pull back, and then she would release another collection, and then she would pull back again. And so I was very lucky to catch her at a time that she was able to accept a commission. And again, this was a little bit of a risk because once again I was branching out into a long distance corset commission with no mock-up fitting, but I was fairly confident in taking my body measurements, and by this point I had already owned a few custom corsets, and I was able to better express the sort of things that I was looking for and the things that I like and preferred. And I knew that she had only taken orders sporadically, so I really had to sort of jump on it at that moment. But I trusted her quality. I loved her shaping and embellishment, and I knew that her prices would only go up over time. So once I had saved up enough, I jumped at it. I took the opportunity to own one of her luxury pieces. And still to this day, it's one of the most beautifully constructed, well-shaped and comfortable overbust corsets that I own. So I definitely didn't regret that decision. Another corset maker that I somewhat spontaneously jumped at the opportunity to work with was Fran from Contour Corsets, because I saw that she was having a summer sale on her very unique summer mesh custom corsets, and I knew that she was only going to increase her prices over time because she was also blowing up in popularity. And I made a video 2 years ago called "Why Do So Many Corset Makers Go Out of Business?" And so I sort of mentioned this in that video as well. But basically, when a corset maker has a sale and then they announce that they are going to increase their prices very, very soon, generally they're at a crossroads. And so they are overworked and underpaid. They have a finite amount of labor and time, and they have two choices. Like, they are forced to either charge more for their corsets and their time, or leave the industry. And you can't always predict which way that's going to go. So I really had to jump on that opportunity. And once again, I'm really glad that I did. Even though my first corset from Contour Corsets did have a couple of small fitting issues here and there, because again, this was no mock-up fitting, long distance, just providing my measurements and little things about my personal taste and what I would like in my corset. But what I have told very few people was that I actually ended up commissioning a second corset from Fran right before she decided to shut down her business. And so I have actually not shown this corset in public, but basically it is one of my best fitting little black corsets that I will always treasure in my collection. But again, by 2015, I realized that there is no perfect way to make a corset, just different ways that are more suited to your taste or less suited to your tastes and your needs. If you happen to commission a custom corset, your very first custom corset from somebody, and it ends up being perfect, consider yourself among the like 0.0001% of the lucky population, because I have almost never heard of that happening. The people that I find tend to be the happiest with their custom corsets are people who choose a corset maker that they trust and they build a rapport with, and they end up commissioning like 3 corsets or 4 or even more corsets from that same corset maker over time, making very small tweaks each time until they get something that is totally perfect for them. And I still can't say that there is one single perfect corset for me. I have a few different corsets that I love for stealthing that have different amounts of rigidity, different heaviness, different silhouettes that I use for different purposes. And I tend to use them all quite frequently. But at different times. And so if you'd like to see my video on my personal quest for a perfect corset that I think I made about 5 or 6 years ago, I'll link it up in the cards and down in the description below. And basically I felt like, you know, Cinderella that hadn't found her shoe yet. You know, there wasn't something that was a perfect fit quite at that point, but over time I slowly got close to it. So those are my 3 phases of my, I guess, corset commission experience, and the requirements and the preferences that I had for each of those phases and what I learned within each one of them. So let me know in a comment down below if you have ordered custom corsets in the past, what your preferences were, what your requirements were, what you prioritized when you were choosing a corset maker and choosing which style of corset to buy from that maker. I would love to know your experiences, and I'm sure many people who are considering taking the plunge and ordering the first custom corset would find it very valuable to hear from you as well. So feel free to leave a comment down below. If you have any questions, feel free to leave your comment below as well, and I'd be happy to get back to you. Thank you all so much for watching to the end of this video, and I'll see you next week for another video.